Hi guys. Tonight we're standing just inside a medieval peasant house. And the first thing you notice is not what you see, but what you feel. Cold presses against your skin in a way that feels patient, almost intelligent. It does not rush. It seeps. It slides through the cracks in the door, creeps up from the packed earth beneath your feet, and settles into your clothes as if it has always belonged there. The air smells faintly of smoke and damp wood. Somewhere nearby, a fire crackles softly. But it does not banish the cold. It merely negotiates with it. You probably won't survive this. At least, not comfortably. Not by modern standards. There is no thermostat to reach for. No extra blanket waiting in a closet. No electricity humming invisibly behind the walls. Warmth here is something you actively maintain, moment by moment, like balance on a narrow beam. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights and let yourself step fully into this space, where warmth is rare, precious, and never taken for granted. You stand still for a second, because movement actually makes you more aware of the cold. Your boots press into the floor, which is not really a floor in the way you know it. It is earth, packed hard by years of feet, swept daily, scattered with straw. The cold from the ground travels upward, quietly, efficiently. Medieval peasants understood something that modern heating hides from us. Cold is not just in the air, it lives in surfaces, in walls, in soil, in stone. Historians generally agree that the average medieval peasant home was colder indoors than most people today would tolerate for more than a few minutes. That is the mainstream reality. Even in winter, interior temperatures often hovered only a few degrees warmer than outside. Yet people lived entire lives like this. They raised children. They grew old. They slept, night after night, in rooms where their breath sometimes fogged faintly in the dark. You take a slow breath, and your lungs fill with air that feels heavier than modern air. Smoke never truly leaves this space. There is a hearth in the center of the room, or perhaps pushed against one wall, depending on region and period. It burns wood, peat, maybe dried dung. The fire is small right now, carefully managed. Firewood is too valuable to waste on showy flames. Heat is rationed. There is an odd comfort here. Though, the fire crackles. The walls lean inward slightly, as if protecting what little warmth they can trap. The ceiling is low enough that you instinctively hunch your shoulders. That was not an accident. Lower ceilings meant less air to heat. A simple architectural choice that quietly saved lives. Some scholars suggest that medieval people did not perceive cold the same way we do. Historians still argue whether this was a matter of physical adaptation or cultural expectation. Did their bodies actually tolerate lower temperatures better? Or did their minds simply frame cold as normal, unavoidable, and therefore less distressing? The debate lingers, unresolved. Like smoke near the rafters, you shift your weight, and straw rustles softly beneath your feet. That sound will follow you everywhere in this house. Straw is insulation, bedding, flooring, sometimes even wall stuffing. It traps air. It softens contact with the frozen ground. It smells faintly sweet when fresh, sour when old. In winter, it is renewed more often, because damp straw steals warmth instead of preserving it. There is no such thing as wasted heat here. Every action is quietly optimized. When the door opens, it is opened quickly. When it closes, it is shut firmly. You notice how the door frame is low and narrow. Another deliberate choice. Smaller openings mean less heat escapes, and fewer drafts sneak inside like thieves. A quirky detail emerges from household records and later rural traditions. Some peasants reportedly hung old cloaks or woven mats over doors at night, creating a primitive heat curtain. Not everyone did this. and the materials varied wildly. But the idea was the same everywhere. Slow the cold down. Make it work harder to reach you. You move closer to the hearth. Not too close. Sparks jump sometimes. And burns are serious matters when medical help is distant and infection poorly understood. The warmth on your shins feels immediate. Almost luxurious. Your back, meanwhile, remains cold. Medieval warmth is uneven. It comes in patches. You rotate yourself slowly, like meat over a spit, sharing time between warmth and chill. Above you, smoke drifts upward, escaping through a hole in the roof or through gaps in the thatch. Chimneys, as you imagine them, are rare or non-existent at this social level. The smoke stings your eyes slightly. You blink, and your eyes adjust. Living in smoke was part of the deal. Some historians believe this constant exposure helped preserve wooden beams by discouraging insects. Others argue it was simply tolerated because alternatives were too expensive or complex. Either way, you lived in it. You slept in it. You listen. Outside. Winter sounds are muted. Snow absorbs noise. Wind hums softly, pushing against walls that flex just a little under pressure. Inside, you hear breathing, the fire, the faint shifting of animals nearby, perhaps in an attached byre or separated only by a wooden partition. We will come back to them later. They matter more than you might think. For now, you begin to understand the core truth of medieval peasant warmth. It was never about comfort. It was about survival. Staying warm meant staying alive. Keeping fingers flexible enough to work. Joints loose enough to move. Lungs strong enough to endure months of cold air and damp conditions. And here is the part that feels almost unsettling. This was not considered extreme. This was normal life. Winter was expected. Cold was planned for. The absence of heat, as you define it, was simply the baseline condition of existence. You rub your hands together instinctively, even though no one here would think to do it without purpose. Every movement costs energy. Every calorie matters. Food is heat, stored inside the body. We will talk about that fire soon. For now, you stand, absorbing the quiet resilience of this space. The walls do not complain. The fire does not roar. The cold does not scream. It waits. And you, slowly, begin to adjust. You begin to notice the house itself in a new way, not as shelter in the modern sense, but as a quiet tool designed to bargain with winter. Every part of it seems to lean inward, conspiring to keep warmth from escaping too quickly. The walls are thick, far thicker than you would expect for people with limited resources. Stone in some regions, wattle and daub in others, packed with clay, straw, dung, anything that could slow the movement of cold air. These walls are not about beauty. They are about time. Every extra minute they hold warmth could mean the difference between comfort and shivering. You step closer and run your fingers along the interior surface. It feels cool, but not biting. The material absorbs heat slowly, and releases it just as slowly. That is the point. Historians broadly agree that thermal mass, though not understood scientifically at the time, was exploited instinctively. Thick walls stored the day's warmth and gave it back reluctantly after sunset. Not enough to feel warm, exactly, but enough to soften the drop. The windows catch your attention next. Or rather, the lack of them does. There might be one small opening, perhaps covered with oiled cloth, animal bladder, or thin horn if the household is fortunate. Glass exists in the Middle Ages. Yes, but it belongs to churches and the wealthy. For peasants, windows are liabilities. They leak heat. They invite drafts. So they are kept small, placed high, and sometimes shuttered completely through the coldest months. You probably feel a faint urge to open a window, to let fresh air in, to clear the smoke. No one here shares that instinct. Fresh air is expensive. Warm air is precious. The balance between breathing and freezing is negotiated daily. The ceiling presses down on you again, low enough that you feel enclosed, almost cocooned. This is not claustrophobia, it is strategy. Warm air rises. The lower the ceiling, the less room it has to escape. Medieval builders may not have spoken in terms of convection, but generations of trial and error taught them what worked. Houses grew squat and compact, not because peasants lacked imagination, but because winter punished tall, airy mistakes. A curious fringe detail appears in some rural traditions. In particularly cold regions, families sometimes stored tools, barrels, or hanging bundles of herbs near the ceiling. Officially, it was for convenience. Unofficially, some historians suggest it helped disrupt airflow, slowing the movement of warm air upward. Historians still debate whether this was intentional thermal management or simply habit layered with later interpretation. Either way, the effect was real. You walk the perimeter of the room, counting steps. It is small. Intentionally so. Large rooms are harder to heat. Even with a fire, a compact footprint keeps bodies, animals, and heat closer together. Every extra step outward from the hearth costs warmth. The corners of the house feel different from the center, colder. Still, this is where damp sometimes creeps in, where frost can appear on the inside during the worst nights. You imagine sleeping near a wall like this and instinctively shudder. Medieval peasants knew better. Beds, such as they were, stayed away from exterior walls when possible. Even inches mattered. The roof above you tells another story. Thatch, straw, reeds, sometimes turf, thick layers piled high. Thatch is not just cheap roofing. It is insulation. Air trapped between layers slows heat loss, and snow resting on top only improves the effect. Adding another insulating blanket. Snow is not always the enemy. Sometimes it is protection. Rain, however, is a different matter. Dampness steals heat far faster than dry cold. That is why roofs are steep, shedding water quickly, and why constant maintenance is part of survival. A leaking roof in winter is not an inconvenience. It is a crisis. You hear a faint drip somewhere, rhythmic and slow. Someone will notice it soon. If they have not already, a bowl will be placed, straw will be shifted. These small acts of maintenance happen continuously, almost unconsciously. Warmth is preserved through attention. The door draws your eye again. Heavy wood, thick planks, reinforced with simple ironwork, if available. Doors are sealed with whatever materials are at hand. Moss stuffed into gaps, rags pressed into cracks, sometimes mud, dried and replaced as needed. A draft is felt immediately and addressed without discussion. Cold air is an intruder, and the house is always on guard. There is a quiet intelligence to this architecture, born not from books, but from memory. Every design choice is a response to a story. A winter that was too cold, a child who fell ill, a night when the fire went out too early. These experiences shape buildings as much as tools shape hands. You think about modern houses, thin walls filled with insulation manufactured far away, powered by systems that hum, invisibly, here. The house itself does the work. Slowly, imperfectly, persistently. Some scholars suggest that medieval peasants experienced their homes almost as living companions. The house aged with them. It creaked in winter. It smelled different in summer. It responded to care. Neglect showed quickly. Historians still argue whether this emotional connection influenced how people endured harsh conditions, or if it is a romantic projection layered on later by writers longing for simplicity. The truth likely sits somewhere in between. You pause near the hearth again and feel the gradient of warmth fade as you step back. The house does not eliminate cold. It delays it. It dulls its sharpest edges. It buys time. That time is everything. Because the fire will not burn all night. Because bodies will cool as sleep deepens. Because winter does not rest. You begin to sense how peasants stayed warm, not through any single solution, but through layers of small decisions, thick walls, low ceilings, tiny windows, careful sealing, constant vigilance. And this is only the shell. The real work of warmth happens inside these walls, in habits, routines, and shared knowledge passed down without writing. The house sets the stage. The people must perform. You shift your weight again, feeling the packed earth beneath your boots, and realize that even standing here, doing nothing, you are warmer than you would be outside. Not warm, but safer. That is the goal. The house sighs softly as the wind presses against it, and holds. The fire is smaller than you expect. Not weak. Exactly. Just restrained. It burns low. Steady. Almost cautious. As if it knows how long the night will be. You crouch near it and feel warmth bloom across your palms. Sharp at first, then soothing. This is not a fireplace built for spectacle. It is a tool. Measured and respected. In many peasant homes, the hearth is not pushed neatly against a wall. It occupies the center of life. Cooking happens here. Light comes from here. Warmth radiates outward in uneven circles. Strongest at the knees and shins, fading quickly above the waist. You learn instinctively where to stand, when to turn. How close is too close? Records from rural households make one thing fairly clear. Fire was rarely allowed to roar. Fuel was precious. Wood had to be gathered, split, dried, and carried. Peat had to be cut and stacked months in advance. Dung had to be shaped and dried. Each fuel type burned differently, smelled differently, and demanded different attention. Waste was unthinkable. You notice how the fire is built low and wide rather than tall. Flames lick sideways, hugging the coals. This design maximizes radiant heat while minimizing sparks. Someone long ago learned this lesson the hard way. Burned roofs, scorched clothing, and scarred hands taught caution better than any rule. The hearthstones are black and smooth, polished by years of heat and touch. Pots hang from hooks above the flames, iron, heavy and slow to warm, but excellent at holding heat once it does. A pot removed from the fire continues to give warmth to the room, quietly, like a second. Smaller hearth. There is a subtle habit here that often goes unnoticed. Ash is never fully cleared away. A thin bed of it remains, insulating the coals beneath. With careful management, embers can survive overnight, buried and protected. In the morning, a little breath, a bit of tinder, and the fire lives again. Starting a fire from nothing is difficult. Keeping one alive is easier. Some surviving household customs hint at just how seriously this was taken. In certain regions, letting the hearth fire die completely was considered deeply unlucky, not because of superstition alone, but because it signaled danger. Cold mornings without embers were harder, slower, riskier. The fear was practical before it was symbolic. You sit back on your heels and notice the smoke again. It curls upward lazily, filling the upper air before escaping through the roof opening. Your eyes sting faintly. Your throat feels dry. This is the price of warmth. There is no clean burn here. No sealed system. Smoke lives with you. It coats beams and rafters in a glossy black layer. Over time, this soot hardens, sealing small gaps, discouraging insects, and preserving wood. An unintended benefit, perhaps, but a real one. The house ages under smoke's protection, even as lungs pay the cost. No one complains. Or rather, complaining serves no purpose. This is simply how fire behaves indoors. You adapt. You learn to angle your head. You blink more often. Children grow up with it and think nothing of it. There is uncertainty about whether medieval people fully understood the health effects of constant smoke exposure. The evidence is scattered. Bones tell some stories. Written sources tell others. What seems clear is that short-term warmth consistently outweighed long-term risk. When winter presses hard, survival narrows your focus. You notice how people cluster near the fire without crowding it. Space is negotiated wordlessly. The youngest, the oldest, the weakest stay closest. Strength is shared, but so is heat. This is not sentimental. It is efficient. A lesser-known detail emerges from some seasonal accounts. During extreme cold, families sometimes shifted daily routines so that tasks requiring stillness happened nearest the hearth. Spinning, mending, tool repair. Movement was saved for daylight and warmth. Even time was reorganized around fire. You stretch your hands, flexing fingers stiffened by cold. The warmth fades quickly when you pull away. This teaches patience. You do not warm everything at once. You warm parts, in turns. At night, the fire shrinks further. Flames give way to glow. Light dims. Shadows grow long and heavy. The room cools noticeably, inch by inch. Someone adds a final log, carefully chosen, too large, and it burns wastefully. Too small, and it disappears too soon. The hearth is never trusted blindly. Someone always wakes during the night. A half-sleeping check, a shift of embers, a quiet adjustment. Fire is comfort, but it is also threat. Houses burn easily. Villages can vanish overnight. There is a reason many medieval fires are built directly on earth or stone, not wood, not raised platforms. Safety lives in simplicity. You feel a strange respect forming, not for fire itself, but for the relationship people maintain with it. It is not domination. It is cooperation. The fire gives warmth if you feed it properly. It punishes carelessness quickly. Some interpretations suggest that the hearth functioned almost as a social anchor. Stories were told near it. Disputes softened. Silence felt heavier without its sound. Whether this emotional role was conscious or simply a byproduct of proximity remains unclear. But the pattern repeats across regions and centuries. You listen to the crackle. Slow and rhythmic. It becomes a kind of breathing. The house inhales warmth. The night exhales cold. As the fire settles, you begin to realize something quietly important. Heat here is never stable. It fluctuates. It demands attention. Warmth is not a background condition. It is an activity. And when the fire dims, when the room cools and shadows thicken, other strategies will take over. Clothing, bedding, bodies. The hearth is only the beginning. The smoke never really goes away. Even now, as the fire settles into a quieter rhythm, you feel it lingering in the air. Thin but persistent. It threads itself through every breath. Not harsh enough to choke, not light enough to ignore. When you turn your head, the smell sharpens for a moment, then softens again. Wood, ash, something faintly sweet, something faintly sour. Smoke becomes part of the house's texture, as familiar as the walls themselves. You blink slowly. Your eyes adjust. People here do not squint or cough the way you expect. They have learned how to exist in this atmosphere. Heads tilt instinctively. Children are taught early where to sit, where not to linger too long. Smoke rises, but not neatly. It pools near the ceiling, drifts sideways, sinks back down when the fire shifts. The room breathes unevenly. In many peasant homes, there is no chimney in the modern sense. Instead, smoke escapes through a hole in the roof, through gaps in thatch, through imperfect seams where materials meet. This is not careless construction. It is the result of limited options. Building a proper chimney requires skill, materials, and money most peasants do not have. What seems clear from household layouts across medieval Europe is that smoke-filled interiors were normal rather than exceptional. People did not consider them failures. They were simply the cost of having fire indoors at all. You feel a faint warmth gathering near the ceiling. Unreachable. Hovering above your head. Warm air rises and stays there. Trapped just out of reach. This is why people sit. Crouch. Lie down. Standing wastes heat. Warmth lives low, close to the ground, near the fire's reach. The smoke leaves its mark everywhere. Beams overhead are darkened to a deep, glossy brown. Rafters shine faintly in the firelight. Polished, not by care, but by years of soot. Over time, this layer hardens, sealing cracks and discouraging pests. Woodworms, insects, even some molds retreat from smoke-heavy environments. There is a quiet irony here. The same smoke that irritates lungs also preserves the house. Some structures survive centuries longer because of it. No one intended this outcome, but it became part of the system all the same. You shift slightly and feel your throat dry. Someone nearby clears theirs softly. A cup of water or weak ale is passed around, not just for thirst, but to soothe smoke-scratched throats. Hydration is warmth-adjacent survival. Dry air chills faster. One overlooked practice appears in scattered rural traditions. During the coldest weeks, families sometimes reduced ventilation deliberately, even blocking roof gaps partially at night. The room grew smokier. Yes, but noticeably warmer. Whether this was a widespread habit or an emergency measure remains uncertain. But the logic is easy to understand. Less escape meant more retained heat. The balance was delicate. Too much smoke, and breathing became difficult. Too little, and cold crept back in aggressively. People learned to read smoke the way sailors read wind. The direction of its drift told you whether to adjust the fire. The door. The roof opening. You imagine lying down to sleep in this air. Smoke sinking lower as the fire fades. It sounds unbearable by modern standards. Yet generations did exactly that. Sleep came anyway. Bodies adapt when there is no alternative. There is disagreement about how much harm this constant smoke caused over a lifetime. Skeletal remains sometimes show signs of chronic respiratory stress. Written sources mention coughing fits and eye troubles, but there is no sense of alarm in these records. Illness was part of life. Winter itself was dangerous enough that smoke felt like a tolerable risk. You notice how the house smells layered. Not unpleasant, just complex. Smoke blends with wool, damp earth, old wood, stored grain. Each house develops its own scent signature, recognizable even in darkness. Visitors know where they are before they see it. At night, when the fire dims to embers, smoke behaves differently. Without strong heat to lift it, it settles lower, closer to where people sleep. You imagine curling under blankets, breathing shallowly, learning to rest in half-clean air. Children grow into this environment and accept it without question. Some families adjust sleeping positions to manage smoke exposure, heads turned away from the hearth, beds angled slightly. Small changes that make long nights easier. Nothing dramatic, just adaptation layered on adaptation. There is something strangely comforting about the smoke's constancy. Wind may howl outside, snow may bury paths and fields. Inside, the air remains thick but familiar. Predictability itself becomes a kind of warmth. You listen closely and hear the soft hiss of embers. The occasional pop as sap pockets release. Smoke responds instantly, twisting and curling, as if alive. The house watches it carefully, even when half asleep. In this world, cleanliness is not defined by freshness or clarity. It is defined by function. Smoke belongs because it allows fire to belong. Fire allows life to continue through winter. Some observers from later centuries describe medieval interiors as dark, dirty, suffocating. Those words miss the point. For the people who lived here, smoke was not a sign of failure. It was evidence of survival. You rub your eyes gently, then stop. Touching them too often makes the sting worse. This, too, is learned behavior. Children copy adults. Habits pass silently from one generation to the next. As the night deepens, smoke thins slightly. Drawn upward by the faint heat that remains, the room cools. Breath becomes more noticeable. The fire no longer dominates the space. Other sources of warmth must take over. The smoke lingers anyway. It always does. It settles into hair, into clothing, into memory. And when morning comes, when the embers are coaxed back into flame, the smoke will rise again, obedient and unavoidable. It never leaves. And because of that, neither does the warmth. You look down, finally paying attention to what supports everything else. The floor is not flat in the way you expect. It dips slightly where countless feet have passed. It feels firm, but not hard. And beneath your soles, there is a faint springiness that surprises you. Packed earth, layered with straw, rushes, maybe dried reeds. This is not decoration. It is insulation, quietly doing its work. Cold rises from the ground relentlessly. Stone and soil store winter the way thick walls store heat, but with far less generosity. Medieval peasants learned early that ignoring the floor was a mistake. Feet numb first, legs stiffen. Cold travels upward slowly but persistently. So the ground is softened, thickened, covered. Straw crunches softly as you shift your weight. It traps air. Air slows cold. The principle is simple, even if the explanation was never formalized. Fresh straw smells faintly sweet and grassy. Old straw turns sour, damp, heavy. In winter, households are careful to keep it dry. Wet straw becomes an enemy. Moisture steals heat faster than bare earth ever could. What emerges clearly from household accounts and seasonal routines is that floor coverings were renewed far more often in winter than in summer. Straw was not just swept and forgotten. It was managed, replaced, redistributed. This took time and effort. But the reward was immediate. Warmer feet meant longer endurance. You notice that the thickest layers sit closest to where people rest and sleep, near the hearth, beneath benches, around beds. Paths where people walk frequently are thinner, pressed down by movement. Warmth is prioritized where bodies stay still. There is a small detail that rarely makes it into grand historical narratives. In some regions, peasants scattered aromatic herbs among the straw, not primarily for scent, though that helped. Some plants discouraged insects. Others absorbed moisture more effectively. The choice varied by location and availability. But the intention was practical. Comfort mattered, even in small ways. You crouch and run your fingers through the straw. It is coarse, uneven, sometimes sharp, not luxurious, but between straw and bare ground, there is no contest. Even a thin layer changes everything. Sleeping directly on earth is punishing. Cold pulls heat from the body steadily through contact. Straw interrupts that exchange. It creates pockets of trapped air, slowing the loss, combined with blankets above. It forms a basic thermal sandwich. Crude, but effective. There is uncertainty about how thick these layers typically were. Some interpretations suggest only a sparse scattering. Others point to deep, mattress-like piles renewed seasonally. The truth likely varied household by household, depending on access to fields, labor, and animals. What is consistent is the awareness that the floor mattered. You straighten and notice the way straw dulls sound. Footsteps are softened. Objects dropped make dull thuds rather than sharp cracks. The house becomes quieter. Winter already muffles the outside world with snow and still air. Inside, straw deepens the silence. Quiet itself feels warm. You imagine nights here, fire dimmed, smoke settled, bodies wrapped in wool, straw beneath, blankets above, heat trapped between layers, not abundant, but sufficient, enough to sleep, enough to wake again. There is a common modern assumption that medieval floors were filthy, neglected, chaotic. The reality is more nuanced. Dirt was present. Yes, but so was routine maintenance. Straw was swept, turned, removed when foul. Cleanliness was defined differently. But it was not absent. Some households used rushes instead of straw, especially in wetter regions. Rushes were tougher, more water-resistant. They lasted longer under damp conditions. The choice of floor covering reflects local ecology as much as culture. People used what grew nearby. You feel a faint warmth rising from the floor now. Not because it generates heat, but because it refuses to surrender it quickly. The difference between standing on bare stone and standing on straw is subtle at first, dramatic over hours. This awareness shapes behavior. Shoes stay on indoors. Thick socks, sometimes layered, protect feet from contact cold. People sit on low stools or benches rather than directly on the ground. Every decision minimizes exposure. There is a practical reason floors remain uneven. Perfectly smooth surfaces require effort and materials. More importantly, slight irregularities trap straw better. They prevent it from shifting too easily. Imperfection becomes an advantage. In extreme cold, some families increase floor layers temporarily. Extra straw, old cloth, even spare cloaks spread beneath sleeping areas. These are not everyday practices, but emergency responses to particularly brutal weather. Adaptation happens quickly when survival demands it. You notice that children play closer to the ground than adults, crawling, sitting, rolling in straw. They learn early where warmth lingers and where it fades. Cold teaches spatial awareness. The smell of straw blends with smoke and wool, creating the familiar scent of winter interiors. It signals safety, shelter. The outside world may be frozen solid, but here, the ground itself feels gentler. Some interpretations suggest that living so close to Earth created a different relationship with temperature. Modern floors insulate us completely from the ground. Medieval floors mediate. You feel cold, but not all at once. The sensation is gradual, manageable. You adjust before discomfort becomes pain. You shift again, listening to the quiet rustle beneath your feet. Straw moves, settles, conforms. It is never fixed. Like warmth itself, it requires attention. When straw becomes too compacted, it loses effectiveness. Someone will loosen it with a rake or fork. When it becomes damp, it will be replaced. These tasks are unremarkable, woven into daily life. You begin to understand that staying warm here is not about heroic measures. It is about dozens of small, uncelebrated choices. A handful of straw added at the right moment, a damp patch removed before nightfall, a path redirected to preserve thickness where sleep will come. The floor does not draw your eye. It does not announce its importance, but without it, the cold would rise unchecked, stealing heat while you rest, while you dream, while the fire sleeps. You stand quietly for a moment longer, feeling the earth held at bay beneath you, and realize that warmth in this world begins from the ground up. You become aware of the weight on your body long before you think of it as clothing. It presses gently against your shoulders, your arms, your legs. Not tight, not restrictive, just present. Layer after layer, resting there, doing quiet work. Medieval warmth begins on the skin and builds outward, not with a single heavy garment, but with accumulation. You tug at a sleeve and feel coarse fabric slide over another layer beneath it. Linen closest to the body. Wool above? Sometimes more wool on top of that. Each layer traps air. Each pause between fibers slows the escape of heat. The idea is simple, learned through generations of cold mornings and long nights. Most everyday medieval clothing was not tailored for fashion. It was cut for coverage. Long tunics, sleeves that reached the wrist, cloaks that wrapped and overlapped. Openings were minimized. Gaps invited cold. Surviving descriptions of peasant wardrobes show remarkable consistency across regions. Linen shirts or shifts formed the base layer, absorbing sweat and protecting outer garments from frequent washing. Wool followed, thick and resilient. Wool mattered more than any other fabric. It kept insulating even when damp, something plant fibers could not manage. There is little doubt that wool was the backbone of medieval warmth. Sheep quietly shaped survival more than kings or battles ever did. Fleece turned into yarn, yarn into cloth, cloth into shelter worn on the body. Without it, winter would have been far harsher. You rub your forearm and feel the roughness. Wool itches at first. People complain. Even then. But discomfort fades. Cold is worse. Over time, skin toughens. Expectations shift. What once felt irritating becomes reassuring. There is a small, often overlooked habit connected to clothing maintenance. Garments are rarely washed in winter unless absolutely necessary. Washing strips oils from wool and requires long drying times, which is dangerous when temperatures stay low. Clothes are aired instead. Brushed, shaken, smoked lightly near the hearth. Clean enough is enough. You notice that clothing is not removed indoors. There is no concept of taking off your coat because there is no sudden change in temperature between inside and outside. The house may be slightly warmer, but not by much. Clothing stays on. Layers remain intact. At night, some garments are loosened, but not fully removed. A tunic stays. Leg coverings stay. Removing too much exposes skin to cold air that lingers after the fire fades. Warmth must be conserved through sleep, not sacrificed for comfort. One lesser-known detail appears in wills and household inventories. Extra garments are listed not as luxury, but as necessity. An additional cloak might be shared among family members during severe cold, rotated between those most at risk. Clothing becomes communal insulation. You adjust a cloak around your shoulders and feel how it drapes, how it overlaps at the chest. Cloaks are deceptively effective. They block drafts. They can be doubled, folded, pulled over the head. Hoods are especially valuable, protecting ears and neck where heat escapes quickly. There is disagreement about how much layering was typical during active work. Some interpretations suggest peasants worked lightly clothed to avoid sweat. Others argue that layers stayed on regardless, because removing them wasted heat and time. The truth likely depended on task, weather, and individual tolerance. What is certain is that sweat is dangerous. Moisture against the skin chills rapidly once movement stops. People learn to pace themselves, to slow down before sweating heavily, to open a cloak briefly, then close it again. Temperature regulation becomes a skill. You notice how cuffs are tight, ankles wrapped, necklines modest. Open skin is minimized. Even hands are protected when possible. Mittens, not gloves, appear in colder regions. Fingers share warmth better together than separated. Children wear scaled-down versions of adult clothing, not playful. Practical. Growth is anticipated. Garments are let out. Patched. Adjusted. A coat may pass through several children before it falls apart. Each repair adds another layer of thread, another small barrier against cold. Clothing carries smell. Smoke embeds itself deeply. Wool absorbs it and holds it. This is not unpleasant here. Smoke-scented clothing repels insects and blends with the house. Scent becomes another form of familiarity. You feel the stiffness of dried wool near the hem of your garment. Where it has brushed snow or damp earth earlier, it will soften again near the fire. This cycle repeats daily. Clothing moves between cold and warmth, stiff and supple, night and day. Some households keep a winter set of garments, heavier and less frequently worn. These emerge when temperatures drop sharply. They are not washed until spring. Their weight is reassuring. You feel it settle over you like armor. You begin to understand that clothing here is not identity. It is infrastructure, as essential as walls and fire. Without layers, nothing else matters. There is a quiet rhythm to dressing in the morning. Not rushed, not dramatic. Layers go on in the same order every day. Muscle memory takes over. Even half awake, you know what comes next. Linen, wool, wool again, cloak. At night, garments are placed carefully, not left on the floor, hung near warmth, but not too close to fire. Dampness is checked. Small repairs are made immediately. A tear invites drafts. A loose seam wastes heat. You imagine the silence of winter evenings. Hands moving automatically. Stitching by firelight. Breath fogging faintly as the room cools. Clothing is adjusted. Not admired. Some modern observers underestimate how heavy medieval clothing was. Wearing several kilograms of fabric changes posture, movement, fatigue. But it also creates a constant thermal buffer. You carry warmth with you. You do not rely entirely on the house. As the night deepens, you pull the cloak tighter, feeling the layers settle. Your body heat begins to accumulate inside the fabric. Not quickly, but steadily. Clothing does not defeat the cold. It delays it. It softens it. It gives you time. And in a world where winter stretches endlessly forward, time is warmth. You start to notice the sheep. Not directly. Not yet. But their presence is everywhere. In the smell of the wool, in the weight of your clothing, in the way warmth clings even when the fire fades, long before sheep appear in your sight. They have already done their work. Wool is not just fabric here. It is strategy. It is insurance. It is the quiet reason winter does not win. You pinch the cloth at your sleeve and feel how dense it is. How springy. Wool fibers trap air naturally, curling and locking together in ways plant fibers cannot. That trapped air becomes a barrier, slowing the escape of body heat. Even when the wool grows damp from breath or snow, it continues to insulate. This single property changes everything. Across medieval Europe, sheep outnumber people in many regions. This is not coincidence. Fleece is renewable. It grows back every year. It does not require killing the animal. In a world where resources are stretched thin, that matters. What emerges consistently from agricultural records is how carefully sheep were protected through winter. They were fed first in lean times, sheltered more carefully than cattle in some places. Their survival meant future warmth, not just meat or milk. You imagine the rhythm of shearing months earlier, spring or early summer. Wool cut close, washed, carded, spun. Every step takes time. Every step involves hands. Spinning happens whenever spare moments appear. By firelight, by daylight, while watching children, while resting aching backs. Thread accumulates slowly, patiently. That thread becomes cloth, woven tightly enough to block wind, loosely enough to breathe. The balance is learned, not taught. A poorly woven cloth leaks warmth. A too tight weave becomes stiff and uncomfortable. Generations refine the skill. There is a subtle detail in medieval clothing that often goes unnoticed. Seams are placed where heat loss matters least. Shoulders are reinforced. Overlaps are generous. Gaps are avoided. Even without modern theory, people understand where cold bites hardest. Wool blankets matter just as much as garments. Thicker than clothing. Heavier. Scratchier. They smell strongly of sheep, smoke, and use. These blankets are rarely washed. Washing strips natural oils that help repel moisture. Instead, they are aired, beaten, smoked lightly. Clean enough is sufficient. You pull a wool blanket over your shoulders and feel its immediate effect. The weight presses warmth inward. Your breathing slows slightly. There is comfort in heaviness. Modern weighted blankets echo this ancient logic, though few realize it. Sleeping under wool changes posture. You curl instinctively, minimizing exposed surface area. Heat gathers in the core. Extremities cool first. This is expected. Toes go numb. Fingers stiffen. The body protects what matters most. Some accounts suggest that multiple people shared blankets in extreme cold. Not always full body contact, but overlapping edges. Layered coverage. Warmth spreads outward through fabric more evenly when shared. Privacy yields to survival without drama. There is disagreement about how standardized wool quality was among peasants. Some interpretations paint a picture of coarse, inconsistent fabric. Others argue that rural wool, while rough, was remarkably functional and well adapted to climate. Both views likely hold truth depending on region and year. Weather affects sheep. Sheep affect cloth. You notice how wool dulls sound. It absorbs noise, softens echoes. Rooms filled with wool feel quieter, calmer. Winter already hushes the world outside. Inside, wool deepens that silence. Rest becomes easier. The smell of wool is everywhere now. Earthy, animal, familiar. It blends with smoke and straw into a single winter scent. That smell becomes a signal to the body. Shelter, safety, night. Children learn early how to manage wool, how to shake off snow before it melts into dampness, how to hang garments near warmth without scorching them, how to turn blankets to dry evenly. Mistakes are corrected gently. Cold teaches quickly. Wool is also patched endlessly. Holes are inevitable. Wear concentrates at elbows, knees, heels. Repairs add layers, not weakness. A patched garment is often warmer than a new one. Thread thickens the fabric. History accumulates visibly. You think about how little wool is wasted. Scraps become mittens. Felted pieces become insoles. Even felted. Shrunk wool still insulates. Nothing warm is discarded lightly. In colder regions, wool is sometimes felted deliberately, compressed with moisture and pressure into dense sheets. Felt blocks wind almost completely. It is heavier, stiffer, but brutally effective. Felt cloaks are not elegant, but winter does not reward elegance. There is a quiet intimacy in wool production. Families know which sheep produce softer fleece, which produce longer fibers. Preferences form. Choices are remembered. Wool connects people to animals in a practical, ongoing way. Some scholars suggest that medieval Europe's reliance on wool-shaped settlement patterns, trade routes, even political relationships. That may be true on a grand scale. But here, in this room, the impact is immediate and personal. Without wool, the night would feel much longer. You settle deeper into blankets and feel heat accumulate slowly. Steadily, the fire dims. Smoke thins. Cold presses inward from walls and floor. But the wool holds. It does not create warmth. It guards it. Patiently, faithfully. As your breathing evens out, you realize that wool is not just clothing or bedding. It is the invisible wall closest to the body. The last line of defense when everything else cools. And when the hearth finally sleeps, when smoke fades and darkness thickens, it is the wool that stays awake with you. Sleep does not arrive here the way you expect it to. It is not a clean break between day and night. Not a sudden collapse into darkness. It comes in layers. Like everything else, the fire dims first. Light softens. Shadows stretch. The room cools inch by inch, giving your body time to adjust. You begin to arrange yourself deliberately. Sleeping is not passive here. It is a strategy. Beds, if they exist at all, are low. Sometimes nothing more than a wooden frame or a raised platform. Often just a pallet laid over straw. Height matters. Cold pools near the ground. Yes, but contact with earth steals heat more aggressively than cold air does. A little elevation helps. Not much, just enough. You position yourself away from exterior walls. This is instinctive. Even without touching them, walls radiate cold inward after sunset. The difference between sleeping a foot away and sleeping against the wall is noticeable by morning. Blankets come next. Wool, layered thickly. Heaviest on top, lighter beneath. Weight presses warmth downward. Gaps are tucked carefully. Feet are covered twice. Heat escapes fastest there. You notice how people sleep closer together in winter, not always touching, but close enough that shared warmth fills the space between bodies. A child sleeps between adults. Elderly family members are positioned nearest the center of the group. This is not spoken. It simply happens. Some households sleep with heads oriented away from the hearth, others toward it. The choice depends on smoke behavior in that particular house. Each family learns its own patterns. There is no universal rule, only local wisdom. There is an old habit, rarely written down, but widely practiced. People sleep wearing caps, simple cloth, tied under the chin. Heat escapes rapidly from the head. Covering it makes a measurable difference. Modern studies would later confirm what medieval peasants already knew through experience. You pull a cap low and feel immediate relief. Your ears warm. Your scalp stops tingling. Sleep deepens faster. The fire is reduced to embers now. A faint red glow pulses softly. Someone has placed a large log nearby. Ready for morning. Not on the fire. Beside it. Too close, and it dries unevenly. Too far, and it stays cold. During the night, someone wakes. Not fully. A practiced half-wake. They stir the embers slightly. Just enough to keep them alive. Then they settle back down. No conversation. No light. The movement is almost silent. There is uncertainty about how frequently this happened across households. Some evidence suggests fires were allowed to die completely in milder regions. Other accounts imply constant tending in harsher climates. What is clear is that embers were valued. Morning without them meant cold hands. Stiff fingers. Slower days. You listen to the sounds of sleep around you. Breathing. A quiet cough. Straw shifting. Outside. Wind brushes the roof. Snow slides softly from thatch. Inside. Everything feels suspended. Held together by warmth barely above loss. Dreams come differently in cold. Shorter. Fragmented. You wake more often. But waking does not always mean rising. You adjust blankets. Tuck a foot. Curl tighter. Sleep resumes. There is a shared understanding that night is dangerous. Cold deepens after midnight. Bodies cool. Fires fade. Vigilance increases slightly. Even in sleep, awareness lingers. Some families keep a small animal nearby at night. A cat curled near feet. Occasionally a dog. They add warmth. Yes. But more importantly, they sense changes. A sudden draft. A noise outside. A shift in fire behavior. Animals become part of the warning system. You realize that sleeping here is not about perfect rest. It is about recovery. Enough warmth to avoid illness. Enough rest to work again tomorrow. Luxury does not factor into the equation. There is disagreement about how many hours peasants slept in one stretch. Some interpretations suggest segmented sleep, with a waking period around midnight. Others argue that sleep simply lightened and deepened naturally in response to cold and fire cycles. Both possibilities fit the evidence. The night was not rigidly scheduled. You feel your muscles relax slowly as heat stabilizes under the blankets. The initial chill fades into background sensation. Breathing steadies. Thoughts drift. In the darkness, you become aware of small details. The smell of wool, the faint tick of cooling embers, the distant sound of animals shifting in their sleep. These become signals of safety. Outside, winter holds the land in silence. Fields frozen. Paths buried. The world narrowed to this room. Inside, warmth is fragile but sufficient. It depends on preparation, positioning, and habit. Miss one, and the night becomes long. You adjust one last time, pulling the blanket edge closer to your chin. The cap stays in place. Feet are tucked. The floor's cold remains at bay. Sleep settles over you. Not deep and heavy, but steady enough. The kind that keeps you alive. And as the night wears on, as the fire fades and the cold presses inward, your body holds its heat carefully, guarded by wool, by habit, by the quiet knowledge passed down through countless winters. You hear them before you see them. A soft shuffle, a low breath, the faint clink of a hoof against wood. The animals are close. Closer than modern instincts might prefer. But here, in winter, Distance is a luxury few can afford. Livestock are not kept far away when cold tightens its grip. Separation wastes heat, so barns press against houses. Byres share walls. Sometimes there is no true division at all, just a wooden partition, slatted and imperfect, allowing warmth, sound, and smell to pass freely. You wrinkle your nose at first. Animal scent mixes with smoke and damp straw. It is strong, earthy, alive, but it carries something else with it. Heat. A cow produces a remarkable amount of warmth simply by existing. Sheep, goats, pigs, even chickens contribute their share. A cluster of bodies radiates steady heat through the night. Slow and reliable. Not dramatic, not flickering like fire. Constant. Across many medieval settlements, it becomes clear that animals were deliberately housed close during winter months. This was not merely convenience, it was calculation. Heat lost from animals into open air was wasted. Heat shared with humans extended survival on both sides. You step closer to the partition and feel the difference immediately. The air is warmer here, heavier. Moisture hangs in it. Breath fogs less. This side of the house feels protected, buffered from the worst of the night. There is a common misconception that medieval peasants lived in filth by choice. The reality is more restrained. Animals are not allowed to roam freely indoors. They are contained, bedded deeply, cleaned regularly. Especially in winter, when dampness invites illness. Manure is valuable fertilizer. Waste is managed, not ignored. A lesser-known practice appears in some rural traditions. Straw used for animal bedding is later transferred to human sleeping areas after partial use. The animal's warmth dries it, softens it, enriches it. Then it becomes insulation for people. Heat is recycled, not squandered. You hear the slow chewing of a cow, the quiet contentment of ruminating. Animals conserve energy in winter too. Movement is minimized. Feeding is measured. Survival synchronizes across species. There is uncertainty about how widespread true cohabitation was across all of medieval Europe. Some interpretations emphasize regional differences, with northern climates favoring closer integration, while milder regions maintained more separation. Both patterns appear in the record. What remains consistent is the logic behind the choice. You notice that people sleep closer to the animal side of the house during the coldest nights. Beds shift slightly. Pallets move. Warmth maps itself onto living space. No one needs to explain why. Children are warned not to startle animals at night. A sudden kick can be dangerous. Calm is essential. Familiarity grows. Animals recognize voices. They respond to routine. Winter deepens these relationships. There is another benefit that is rarely mentioned. Animals help regulate humidity. Their breath adds moisture to dry winter air, easing cracked skin and sore throats. Too much moisture invites mold, but too little sharpens cold. Again, balance is learned through experience. You feel a strange comfort in the sounds. Breathing, shifting, occasional snorts. They anchor the night, reminding you that life continues even as fields sleep under snow. Some households keep smaller animals directly in the living space during severe cold. Chickens roost in corners. Rabbits are brought indoors, not out of sentiment, but necessity. Frozen livestock means lost food, lost wool, lost warmth. There is disagreement about how people felt emotionally about this closeness. Did they find comfort in it, or simply accept it as unavoidable? Written sources are scarce on feelings. What survives are patterns of behavior, and those patterns suggest practicality over preference. You imagine waking in the night, half asleep, hearing a cow shift and feeling warmth pulse faintly through the wall. It is reassuring. The fire may fade, but the animals remain warm. Their bodies do not extinguish. Morning comes earlier, near animals. Sounds increase as they stir. Anticipating feeding, this nudges people awake. Winter mornings are hard. Stiff joints, cold fingers, But animals demand attention. Their needs pull people out of blankets and toward the hearth. In return, animals give milk, labor, wool, meat, and heat. The exchange is constant. Winter makes this relationship visible. You begin to understand that medieval warmth is communal not just among people, but across species. Survival blurs boundaries modern life insists upon. Comfort yields to continuity. The smell no longer bothers you. It has become part of the night's texture, woven into warmth itself. Cleanliness here means functionality, not separation. You settle back down, nearer the partition now, feeling the air grow slightly less sharp. The animal side of the house hums softly with life. The cold presses against outer walls, but inside, warmth circulates slowly, patiently. Fire, wool, straw, bodies, animals. No single element is enough on its own. Together, they create a fragile equilibrium that holds through winter's longest nights. And as you drift toward sleep again, the quiet presence of animals nearby reminds you that survival here is shared. Warmth does not always come from outside the body. Sometimes it is carried within, released slowly, deliberately, through digestion and effort. Food here is not just nourishment, it is fuel. It is internal fire. You feel it after eating, a gentle spread through the chest, the belly. Muscles loosen slightly, fingers regain feeling. This is not imagination. Dense food produces heat as it breaks down. People notice this long before anyone explains why. Meals shift with the season. In winter, light foods disappear. Fresh vegetables are rare. What remains is heavy, filling, stubbornly caloric. Bread thick with grain. Porridge made from oats or barley. Stews rich with fat when available. Even small amounts of grease are prized. What emerges clearly from winter household patterns is that fat matters. Animal fat especially. It burns slowly in the body, releasing energy over time. Lean meat fills the stomach but fades quickly. Fat sustains. That difference is learned through long nights and harder mornings. You dip bread into a pot and feel the warmth of it against your fingers. The stew is simple. Whatever was preserved from autumn: beans, onions, root vegetables, a scrap of salted meat if fortune allowed. It smells rich, earthy, comforting. Salt plays a role too. Preserved foods dominate winter diets. Salted meat, salted fish in coastal or river regions. Salt sharpens flavor. Yes, but it also encourages thirst, which keeps people drinking fluids that warm the body from within. There is a quiet rhythm to winter eating. Meals cluster around the hearth. People eat slowly, deliberately, not because food is scarce at every table, but because warmth lasts longer when digestion stretches out. You notice that the largest meal often comes late in the day, after work is done, after the body has cooled. Eating before sleep helps generate warmth through the coldest hours. Nighttime hunger is dangerous. It drains heat when reserves are already low. A lesser-known habit appears in some rural traditions. Before bed, people sometimes drink a warm liquid, thin ale, broth, even hot water when nothing else is available. The liquid itself warms the core, if only briefly, enough to help sleep begin. There is uncertainty about how consistently this practice appeared across regions. Some evidence points to routine use. Other accounts suggest it was reserved for illness or extreme cold. Either way, warmth taken internally mattered. Alcohol plays a complicated role. Small amounts of ale or wine create a sensation of warmth. Blood vessels expand, skin flushes, but too much accelerates heat loss. People learn moderation through experience. Winter punishes excess quickly. You feel the heaviness of food settle into your body, grounding you. Hunger sharpens cold. Fullness dulls it. The connection is immediate and obvious. Children are fed carefully in winter. Extra portions when possible. Growing bodies lose heat quickly. Elderly family members too. Thinness is vulnerability. Families adjust distribution without discussion. Survival dictates fairness differently. Food storage becomes critical long before winter arrives. Grain dried and protected from moisture. Meat salted or smoked. Vegetables buried in pits. These efforts are not about convenience. They are about keeping the body's fire burning months later. There is debate about how nutritionally balanced medieval winter diets truly were. Some interpretations emphasize monotony and deficiency. Others highlight surprising resilience and adequacy given constraints. The truth likely varies widely. A good harvest makes a warm winter. A poor one makes everything harder. You notice that winter work is paced around meals. Effort spikes after eating. Lulls follow. Bodies respond predictably. Labor is scheduled when energy is highest. Idleness is avoided not out of morality, but because movement generates heat. You stand and feel warmth bloom in your muscles as you move. Stillness cools you quickly. Activity warms you, but only briefly. Sweat is dangerous. The balance is delicate. There is a subtle understanding that food and movement must work together. Eat too lightly, and work chills you. Eat too heavily, and work exhausts you. Winter sharpens judgment. You scrape the bowl clean, not out of greed, but respect. Food wasted is warmth wasted. Even crumbs matter. As the meal ends, someone stirs the fire. Pots are set aside to cool slowly, releasing warmth into the room. Nothing is rushed. Heat is allowed to linger. You feel a sense of quiet satisfaction settle in. The cold has not vanished, but it has retreated slightly, enough to make the night manageable. Some observers from later centuries describe medieval food as bland and joyless. Sitting here, warmed from the inside, that judgment feels shallow. Flavor is not the point. Endurance is. You stretch and prepare for sleep again, aware that the warmth in your belly will carry you through the early hours of night. By morning, it will be gone. Another meal will be needed. Another fire fed. Winter is survived one cycle at a time. Eat, work, rest, repeat. Food does not replace hearth or wool, but without it, neither would be enough. And as you settle back into blankets, feeling the last glow of warmth inside you, you understand that staying warm in this world is as much about what you eat as where you stand. You feel it almost immediately when you stop moving. Warmth drains from your limbs, slipping away quietly. Without drama, fingers stiffen, shoulders tighten. The body cools faster than you expect. Medieval peasants learned this lesson early. Heat is not something you keep by resting. It is something you generate. Movement becomes a form of warmth management. Not frantic, not exhausting, steady. Deliberate motion that keeps blood flowing without breaking into sweat. That balance matters more in winter than strength ever could. You stand and stretch slowly, joints creaking in protest. Cold stiffens cartilage. Warmth loosens it. People here know their limits intimately. Push too hard and sweat forms. Sweat chills. Chill leads to sickness. So work is paced, not rushed. Daily tasks are chosen carefully in winter. Heavy labor happens during daylight when the body is already warmer and the sun offers a little help. Indoor tasks fill the coldest hours. Spinning, mending, tool repair, grain grinding, anything that keeps hands moving without soaking clothing. What appears consistently in winter routines is the avoidance of long inactivity. Sitting too long invites cold to settle deep, even during conversation. Hands stay busy. Wool is carded. Rope is twisted. Small motions accumulate warmth over time. You notice how people shift positions frequently. Standing becomes sitting. Sitting becomes crouching. Limbs are tucked and untucked. Blood is encouraged to circulate. This is not fidgeting. It is thermal awareness. There is a small but telling habit passed down quietly. When someone begins to shiver, they are given a task, not rest, not sympathy, movement. Stir the fire. Fetch water. Walk the perimeter. Shivering means heat loss has begun. Action stops it. Children are rarely told to sit still for long in winter. Restlessness is tolerated, even encouraged. Play becomes exercise. Running indoors is frowned upon. But movement itself is valued. Energy keeps them warm. Elderly family members move less easily, but they are not allowed to become still for too long. Gentle tasks are found: sorting, peeling, folding. Hands move even if bodies cannot roam. Warmth must be coaxed continuously. There is disagreement about how demanding winter labor truly was compared to summer. Some interpretations suggest reduced workloads. Others point out that survival tasks simply changed form rather than intensity. Both are partly right. Fields rest. But bodies do not. You step outside briefly and feel the cold bite immediately. It is sharper here, cleaner. The contrast is striking. You move instinctively, stamping feet, swinging arms, before the chill can settle. No one stands idle outdoors in winter unless forced. Fuel gathering itself becomes a warming task. Chopping wood, carrying peat, breaking frozen dung cakes. These jobs heat the body quickly. But they also risk sweat. Layers are adjusted carefully. Cloaks opened briefly, then closed again. You notice how people pause often. Short breaks, not long rests. Just enough to catch breath. Not enough to cool completely. The rhythm is learned. Work flows in pulses. There is a subtle understanding that winter rewards consistency. Bursts of intense effort followed by collapse invite cold to rush in. Slow. Continuous activity maintains equilibrium. Some households keep simple indoor exercise routines without naming them as such. Walking back and forth while reciting prayers. Stretching limbs before bed. Even rocking motions while seated. These habits warm muscles and calm the mind simultaneously. You feel your own body responding as you move. Heat builds. Breath deepens. The cold retreats slightly. Pushed back by circulation rather than fire. Clothing shifts with movement. Layers slide. Wool breathes. The system works best when everything cooperates. Fire. Food. Clothing. Motion. Remove one. And the rest strain. There is uncertainty about whether people consciously understood this balance or simply felt it intuitively. Written instructions are rare. What survives is pattern. And the pattern suggests deep embodied knowledge rather than theory. You watch someone rake straw near the sleeping area. Not because it needs doing urgently, but because the motion keeps them warm. Tasks are invented when necessary. Cleanliness becomes opportunity. At night, movement does not stop entirely. People shift under blankets, curl and uncurl. Small adjustments prevent stiffness. Even in sleep, bodies resist cold through motion. You realize that warmth here is never passive. Even rest involves micro-movements. Stillness belongs to summer. Winter demands participation. The house itself seems to respond. Floors rustle softly. Shadows move. The space feels alive, animated by human motion. Some later observers misinterpret this constant activity as hardship. It is that, yes, but it is also rhythm. Winter imposes a tempo, and people learn to move with it rather than against it. You slow your pace now, careful not to overdo it. Warmth has returned to your hands. That is enough. You settle back near the hearth, breathing evenly, feeling heat stabilize. Movement has done its work. Soon, the night will deepen again. Stillness will creep back in. And when it does, you will rise once more. Not out of restlessness, but necessity. Here, staying warm means staying in motion. You begin to notice how closely time itself clings to warmth. Winter days are short, and no one wastes what little daylight remains. The sun is not just light, it is heat, however weak, and every task bends toward it instinctively. People rise later in winter, not from laziness, but from calculation. Darkness is cold. Morning light offers a small advantage, and they wait for it. You step outside as dawn breaks and feel the difference immediately. The cold is still there, sharp and dry, but it has softened slightly. The sun sits low, pale and distant. Yet its presence matters. Work begins now, not before. Tasks that demand strength and stillness are saved for daylight. Ploughing stops in winter, but woodcutting does not. Repairs do not. Carrying water, hauling fuel, fixing fences damaged by frost. These jobs happen when the sun can take the edge off the cold. Indoor work clusters around the darkest hours. Before sunrise, after sunset, spinning, mending, carving, sorting grain. Hands stay busy while bodies stay close to the hearth. This division is not written down. It is learned by watching elders and copied without question. What appears again and again in winter routines is the careful stacking of tasks to conserve warmth. One activity flows into the next, without long gaps. Idle moments invite chill, so people move smoothly from one task to another, even if the tasks themselves are small. You notice how meals align with light. Eating near midday warms the body when work continues afterward. Eating too early wastes heat. Eating too late risks cooling before digestion helps. Timing becomes another layer of insulation. There is a quiet awareness that the sun's warmth fades quickly once it dips behind trees or hills. Shadows stretch, and the temperature drops almost immediately. When that happens, people retreat indoors without hesitation. Pride has no place here. Cold does not care. You hear doors closing early in winter afternoons, shutters drawn, gaps sealed. The house is prepared to hold what warmth remains. Every minute of daylight used well reduces how much firewood will be needed later. Some rural customs mark wintertime differently. Bells ring earlier. Prayers shift. Stories are told longer in the evening. Time stretches indoors as the outside world contracts. The rhythm of life compresses toward the hearth. There is uncertainty about how standardized these patterns were across medieval Europe. Climate varies. Latitude matters. But the underlying principle remains consistent. Follow the warmth. Avoid the cold. Let the sun set the schedule. You feel a subtle pressure to hurry as afternoon light fades. Not anxiety. Urgency. Hands move faster. Tools are set aside sooner. No one wants to be caught outside when darkness fully settles. Cold thickens then, settling heavier on skin and breath. Children learn this timing early. Play stops when shadows lengthen. Adults do not need to shout. The signal is visual. Winter teaches timekeeping without clocks. Inside, lamps are lit sparingly. Light comes at the cost of fuel. Tallow, oil, candles. These produce some warmth. Yes, but not enough to justify waste. Darkness is tolerated. Eyes adjust. Movement slows. You realize that winter changes the experience of time itself. Hours feel longer when movement is limited. Nights stretch. Days compress. Warmth anchors attention. Cold erodes it. Some later observers describe medieval winter life as monotonous. Sitting here, watching tasks flow around the sun. That judgment feels incomplete. Variety gives way to efficiency, not because people lack imagination, but because survival demands consistency. You listen to the sound of wind outside and note how it sharpens as the sun disappears. Inside, the house holds steady. Fire crackles. People settle into evening routines earlier than summer would allow. The last outdoor task is always fuel. Firewood brought in just before night. Peat stacked near the hearth. Enough to last until morning. Not too much, which invites waste. Not too little, which invites fear. There is a quiet moment when daylight truly ends. A pause. People glance toward the door. Then back to the fire. The outside world closes for the night. You feel your own body respond. Shoulders relax. Movement slows. Warmth becomes something to protect rather than generate. Some households divide night into watches, even in peasant homes. Not formal guards, but light sleepers who wake naturally. They check the fire, Listen for wind shifts. Adjust shutters. Winter nights reward awareness. You notice how conversation changes as evening deepens. Voices lower. Laughter softens. Stories turn inward. Warmth is not just physical now. It becomes emotional, shared through presence. Time bends around cold. Schedules shrink. Days are shaped not by clocks or bells, but by light and heat. The sun rules winter more completely than any lord. As you settle back near the hearth, you realize that staying warm here is also about knowing when to act and when to stop. Timing becomes insulation. Misjudge it, and the cold punishes quickly. The fire burns steadily. Outside, darkness thickens. Inside, warmth survives because time itself has been carefully managed. You notice how close everyone sits now. Not crowded exactly, but nearer than comfort alone would require. Shoulders almost touching. Knees angled inward. Blankets overlapping at the edges. Warmth gathers where bodies gather, and no one pretends otherwise. In winter, space is a luxury. Distance leaks heat. You shift closer to the fire and feel the change immediately. Not just from the flames, but from the people beside you. Human bodies radiate warmth steadily, quietly, far more reliably than embers. One person alone cools quickly. Several together create a shared pocket of heat that lingers. This is not sentimental closeness. It is practical geometry. Across medieval households, people instinctively form clusters during the coldest months. Benches are pulled nearer, stools placed strategically. Children are encouraged to sit between adults. No one explains this arrangement. It simply feels right. You notice how backs are turned outward, shielding the group from drafts, while faces turn inward toward warmth. Cloaks overlap, sleeves brush. Someone shifts, and others adjust without complaint. Cold has a way of erasing unnecessary boundaries. There is a small but telling habit visible in many winter scenes from later illustrations. People share stools, 2 bodies, 1 seat. The reason is rarely stated, but the effect is obvious. Shared contact conserves heat. Even minimal contact reduces exposed surface area. You feel the warmth of the person beside you through layers of wool. It is subtle, but constant, enough to ease the chill that creeps in when the fire fades. Bodies become mobile hearths, each contributing a little to the whole. There is uncertainty about how consciously people understood this effect. No one spoke of radiant heat or thermal exchange, but they felt it. They noticed that sitting alone was colder. That closeness helped. Experience taught faster than theory ever could. Communal warmth reshapes behavior. Meals are eaten together, not just for companionship, but efficiency. Cooking once, heating one space, eating near the hearth while food is hot. Everything clusters inward. You listen to the sound of breathing around you. It blends into a soft rhythm. Exhaled air warms the immediate space. Moisture increases slightly. Dry winter air softens. Throats hurt less. Skin cracks less. Some families use shared blankets during the harshest nights, not always fully covering everyone, but layered across laps and shoulders. One heavy blanket warms multiple bodies better than several thin ones spread apart. Privacy becomes flexible. Winter demands compromise. Personal space expands again in summer. When warmth is abundant, seasonal intimacy has its own rhythm. Children drift between adults, settling where warmth feels strongest. They learn to read temperature gradients without thinking. A step to the left feels colder. A lean to the right feels better. Bodies map warmth instinctively. You notice that conversation slows when people huddle together. Voices drop. Movement decreases. Energy is conserved. The cluster becomes still, efficient, calm. There is a gentle social effect too. Disputes cool when bodies warm. Shared discomfort dissolves small conflicts. Winter enforces cooperation without ceremony. Some interpretations suggest that this physical closeness reinforced community bonds over time. Perhaps it simply kept people alive long enough for bonds to matter. Cause and effect blur in survival. You feel the fire dim slightly, and no one rushes to feed it. The group compensates naturally. Someone shifts closer. Another pulls a cloak tighter. Heat redistribution happens quietly. At night, this closeness intensifies. Sleeping arrangements tighten. Children sleep between parents or siblings. Elderly family members are placed where warmth concentrates. No one sleeps alone unless space demands it. There is a faint discomfort at first. Shared breathing, shared smells, shared movement. But that discomfort fades faster than cold ever does. Warmth persuades acceptance. You notice that even animals sometimes join these clusters. A dog curls at feet. A cat settles near knees. Their warmth adds to the system. They are not pushed away. In this environment, warmth is collective property. No one hoards it successfully. A single warm body in a cold room still freezes. Only together does heat linger. You sit still now, letting the shared warmth settle into you. Your shoulders relax. Your jaw loosens. The cold retreats to the edges of awareness. The outside world feels distant. The wind presses against walls. But inside, the cluster holds. There is something deeply human about this arrangement. Stripped of excess, people return to simple truths. Bodies, warm bodies. Proximity protects. Isolation costs. As the evening deepens, the group remains intact. Movement is minimal. Heat is preserved. And in the quiet, surrounded by breathing and soft wool, you understand that staying warm in the Middle Ages was never a solitary task. It was something done together. You begin to notice the house changing its habits. Not rebuilt, not transformed, just subtly adjusted. As winter deepens, what felt open in summer now feels sealed. What once invited breeze now resists it. The house does not fight the season. It adapts. You watch as shutters are secured more tightly than before. Gaps that were tolerated in warmer months are stuffed with cloth, moss, or straw. These materials are not permanent solutions. They are seasonal answers, applied when needed, removed when no longer useful. Doors gain weight in winter, extra layers hang over them. Old cloaks, woven mats, even sacks. They move slightly when opened, brushing your shoulders, then fall back into place. Blocking drafts. The house learns to close itself. Windows, already small, become smaller still. Sometimes they are covered entirely at night. Light is sacrificed for warmth. No one argues. You learn quickly that seeing a little less is preferable to freezing more. You notice furniture shift position. Benches pulled closer to the hearth. Tables angled to block airflow. Even storage items are rearranged. Barrels and chests become windbreaks. Objects take on new roles when cold arrives. There is a quiet logic to it all. Nothing dramatic, just small reconfigurations that add up. The house becomes more compact, more inward-facing, as if curling into itself against the cold. Some households hang cloth along interior walls during the coldest months. Not decorative tapestries, but rough fabric, worn blankets, old garments stitched together. They trap air, slow heat loss, and soften the chill radiating inward from stone or wood. There is uncertainty about how widespread this practice was. It appears in some regions and not others. But where it appears, the reasoning is consistent. Anything that interrupts cold earns its place. You feel the difference immediately when you brush past one of these hanging cloths. The air behind it feels warmer. Still, protected. Even a thin barrier changes how cold behaves. Sleeping areas are adjusted too. Beds move closer to the hearth. Pallets are shifted away from outer walls. Straw is thickened. Blankets doubled. What felt sufficient earlier in winter is no longer enough as the season hardens. You realize that winter is not static. Cold intensifies in waves. Early frost is manageable. Deep winter demands escalation. People respond accordingly. Layering not just clothing, but habits. Some storage areas are repurposed temporarily. Food is brought closer to living space so people do not need to venture into colder rooms at night. Water containers are moved nearer the fire to prevent freezing. Convenience follows warmth. You notice how rarely the door opens now. Trips outside are planned. Multiple tasks are combined into a single outing. Every opening invites cold to rush in aggressively, undoing hours of careful heat management. Children are reminded to close doors firmly, not scolded harshly, just corrected. Cold teaches accountability quickly. There is a subtle change in sound as the house tightens. Fewer drafts whistle. Less wind seeps through. The interior grows quieter. Sound insulation follows thermal insulation naturally. You feel the house settle into this configuration, like a winter coat worn for weeks. Comfortable in its own way. Familiar. Some later observers describe medieval homes as static, unchanging. Sitting here, watching these seasonal adjustments, that idea feels wrong. The house is dynamic, responsive. It breathes with the year. You notice that decorations, if any exist, disappear in winter. Space is prioritized for function. Objects that do not contribute to warmth are stored away. Austerity increases, not from joylessness, but from focus. There is debate about whether these adjustments were consciously planned or simply repeated tradition. Probably both. People remember what worked last winter. They repeat it. Habits accumulate. You step near the door and feel the draft reduced by layers hung there. The cold no longer slices through instantly. It pushes instead. Slowed and blunted. At night, these adjustments matter most. Fire dims. Bodies rest. The house must hold warmth without constant intervention. These small changes make the difference between restless sleep and tolerable rest. You imagine spring coming. Layers peeled away. Shutters opened. Cloth removed. The house will loosen again. For now, it remains tight. The house does not resent these changes. It expects them. As you settle back into the warmed interior, you understand that staying warm here is not about one clever solution. It is about flexibility, about noticing when the old way is no longer enough, and adjusting before cold overwhelms. Winter rewards those who respond early. And in this house, every wall, every hanging cloth, every shifted bench quietly participates in the work of survival. You begin to sense how much of winter survival lives in memory. Not written memory, not books or records, but carried knowledge, passed quietly from one season to the next. Advice given casually, warnings folded into stories, small sayings repeated without explanation. Weather wisdom lives here, embedded in daily life. You hear it in comments spoken almost offhand. The wind sounds different tonight. The frost feels heavier than yesterday. That sky means trouble. No one pauses to justify these observations. They are accepted because they have proven reliable before. People watch the world closely in winter. Clouds, wind direction, the way smoke moves when it leaves the roof, snow texture underfoot. These signs matter. They help families prepare before cold deepens unexpectedly. You step outside briefly and feel the air shift. It bites more sharply. Someone notices immediately and suggests adding straw before nightfall. There is no debate. Preparation beats reaction. Once the cold settles fully, options narrow. Certain sayings surface again and again across regions. Red skies, silent forests, sudden stillness before snowfall. These phrases are not poetic embellishments. They are compressed experience. Remembered because forgetting costs comfort. Sometimes life. There is uncertainty about how accurate all of this folk knowledge truly was. Some signs likely coincided with weather changes by chance. Others, however, reflect real atmospheric shifts. What matters is that people trusted these signals enough to act on them. You notice how elders are listened to more closely in winter, not because of status, but because they have survived more seasons. They remember the winter when the river froze solid, the year snow crushed roofs, the time firewood ran short. Their advice carries weight. Children absorb this knowledge without formal teaching. They hear warnings repeated. They watch preparations unfold. They remember what happens when advice is ignored. Learning happens through observation and consequence. There is a small but telling habit tied to winter forecasting. Extra fuel is gathered at the first sign of harsher cold. Not when it arrives. Firewood stacked higher. Peat moved closer. Dung cakes dried more carefully. Better to have excess than regret. You feel the house respond to these warnings. Adjustments happen earlier than strictly necessary. Cloth hung. Shutters closed. Beds shifted. These actions feel calm, not panicked. Experience tempers fear. You realize that weather wisdom also governs movement. Travel is avoided when signs suggest storms. Paths disappear quickly under snow. Getting caught outside after dark in worsening cold is dangerous. People learn when to stay put. Some interpretations suggest that medieval peasants were fatalistic about weather, sitting here, watching preparations unfold. That idea feels misplaced. Acceptance does not mean passivity. It means adaptation within limits. You hear someone mention the sound of ice forming on water containers. A subtle crackle. That means temperatures will drop further overnight. The fire will need more attention. Blankets adjusted. Someone will wake to check embers. This knowledge is never dramatic. It does not announce itself. It slips into routine, shaping decisions quietly. There is a recurring pattern of storytelling in winter evenings. Tales of harsh seasons past, of mistakes made, of near disasters narrowly avoided. These stories entertain, yes, but they also instruct. Memory is reinforced through repetition. You feel a strange comfort in this. The cold may be unpredictable, but it is not unknowable. People learn its language over time. Some observers argue that this reliance on folk knowledge limited innovation. Perhaps, but innovation also grows from familiarity. You cannot adapt to what you do not understand. You notice how the house smells slightly different when cold deepens. Sharper, drier. Someone comments on it. Preparations intensify. The senses become instruments. At night, listening to wind shift. You understand that winter here is not endured blindly. It is read, anticipated, negotiated. The fire crackles. Smoke behaves differently. The roof creaks under new weight. All of it is noticed. All of it feeds into decision-making. You pull your blanket tighter, trusting that others have read the signs correctly, that the house is ready, that supplies are sufficient. Folk wisdom does not eliminate risk, but it reduces surprise. And in winter, surprise is dangerous. As sleep approaches, you realize that warmth here depends not just on material strategies, but on shared memory, knowledge accumulated over generations, whispered through evenings like this. Keeps bodies warmer than ignorance ever could. Cold fades slightly at the edges, held back by preparation rooted in remembrance. You begin to sense how belief settles into the cold. Not as denial, not as escape, but as framing. Winter is not treated as an enemy to be conquered. It is something to be endured, accepted, given meaning. That meaning softens its weight. Faith fills the long nights when firewood runs low and daylight disappears too quickly. Prayer is not only about salvation, it is about patience, about rhythm, about reminding yourself that hardship has limits, even when those limits feel far away. You hear murmured words near the hearth, spoken softly, almost rhythmically. Familiar phrases repeated not because they promise warmth, but because they offer steadiness. The act itself is warming. Breath slows. Shoulders drop. Anxiety eases. In many medieval households, winter prayers increase in frequency. Not formality. Short invocations before sleep. Quiet thanks for surviving another day. Requests for mild weather. Healthy animals. Enough fuel to last. These are not dramatic appeals. They are practical hopes. What emerges clearly from surviving devotional habits is that winter sharpened religious routine. Churches filled more consistently during cold months, not necessarily out of fear, but because communal gathering offered warmth, literal and social. Stone walls held heat from packed bodies. Voices rose together, cold retreated briefly. You imagine standing in a small church, breath fogging, candles flickering. The air is still cold, but less isolating. Bodies cluster. Hymns fill space that winter empties elsewhere. Faith becomes insulation of a different kind. There is disagreement about how deeply belief altered the physical experience of cold. Some interpretations suggest it dulled suffering through acceptance. Others argue it simply reframed discomfort as meaningful rather than avoidable. Either way, the emotional effect was real. You feel how rituals mark time when days blur together. Feast days punctuate winter's monotony. Even modest celebrations bring warmth through activity. Shared food, movement, anticipation itself carries heat. Fasting also shapes winter experience. It seems counterintuitive. Less food means less internal warmth. Yet fasting periods are often brief and structured, followed by feasts. The contrast heightens awareness of comfort when it returns. Discipline creates appreciation. You notice how stories of saints and endurance circulate more in winter. Tales of suffering endured patiently, of cold nights survived through faith and resolve. These stories do not erase discomfort. They contextualize it. Children listen closely, not fully understanding theology, but absorbing lessons about perseverance. Cold becomes something you get through, not something that defines you. There is a subtle shift in how hardship is spoken about. Complaints exist, yes, but they are softened. Jokes appear, gentle sarcasm. Humor acts as a release valve. Laughing warms the chest. It shortens breath in a way that feels alive. You sense how belief also encourages care for others. Charity increases in winter. Food shared. Fuel given when possible. Helping others survive the cold reinforces communal bonds. Warmth spreads outward through action. Some observers later describe medieval religion as fatalistic. Sitting here, that feels incomplete. Acceptance does not mean surrender. It means working within reality rather than fighting it blindly. You hear someone cross themselves before sleep. Another whispers a familiar line. These gestures are small, repetitive, grounding. They signal transition from wakefulness to rest. Faith does not heat the room. It does not thicken walls or stretch blankets. But it steadies the mind when cold presses in from every side. It keeps panic from draining warmth faster than temperature ever could. You lie back and let the words fade into background sound. The fire glows faintly. Bodies settle. Outside, winter continues its work. Inside, belief holds the edges together. You begin to notice who winter presses on hardest. Not everyone feels the cold the same way. Children lose heat quickly. Their bodies are small. Their energy constant. Their reserves limited. The elderly feel cold differently. It sinks into joints, settles deep, lingers long after warmth returns. Winter exposes vulnerability without apology. You watch how attention shifts subtly toward these bodies when temperatures drop. No announcements, no speeches, just small adjustments. A child is pulled closer. An extra layer is added without comment. An older hand is guided nearer the hearth. Families learn these patterns early. Experience teaches who needs help first. Warmth is not distributed evenly by default. It is directed where it matters most. Children sleep in the center of the group whenever possible. Between parents, between siblings, their breathing softens as warmth surrounds them. Cold nights are survived this way. Not through equipment, but through positioning. You notice how children are dressed more heavily than adults, even indoors. Extra wool, caps that stay on longer, sleeves that cover hands. Freedom of movement is traded for protection. Protests are brief. Cold convinces quickly. The elderly move less easily now. Stiff joints protest. Fingers curl reluctantly. Tasks are reassigned quietly. They remain useful, but differently. Sorting grain, telling stories, watching embers. Purpose matters as much as heat. Stillness without purpose chills faster. There is a small habit you notice in several households. Elders are given the warmest seat, closest to fire or animals, not as privilege, but necessity. They lose heat faster and regain it slower. The group compensates. Some historical interpretations suggest medieval societies accepted high winter mortality without response. Watching these quiet adjustments, that claim feels oversimplified. People did what they could within limits. Care existed, even if outcomes remained harsh. You hear coughs more often now. Dry air irritates throats. Smoke strains lungs. Children's coughs draw immediate attention. Extra warmth is applied. Fluids offered. Rest encouraged. Illness in winter spreads quickly. There is uncertainty about how effective these measures truly were. Medical understanding was limited, yet observation guided action. Warmth, rest, nourishment. These principles appear again and again across centuries because they worked often enough. You notice how night watches prioritize the vulnerable. Fires are checked with them in mind. Drafts sealed more carefully near sleeping areas. Someone listens for breathing changes. Winter heightens awareness. Children are kept occupied indoors to maintain warmth. Games involve movement. Chores are framed as play. Energy becomes insulation. The elderly sometimes sleep lightly, waking often. This is not always fear. It is habit formed over many winters. Light sleep allows monitoring of cold and fire. Their vigilance contributes to survival. There is a shared understanding that winter is not fair. Strength does not guarantee safety. Youth does not guarantee resilience. Families adapt by redistributing effort and warmth. You feel a quiet tenderness in these moments. Care expressed through action rather than words. A blanket adjusted, a seat offered, a bowl placed closer. Some scholars argue that these patterns reinforced intergenerational bonds. Perhaps, or perhaps winter simply stripped life down to essentials, revealing what mattered all along. As the night deepens, you watch a child stir, shiver once, then settle as warmth is restored. The moment passes without fuss. No one speaks. Winter survival is built from thousands of such moments. You lie back, feeling the house hold together through collective care. Cold presses from outside, but inside, warmth flows toward those who need it most. In this world, survival is not just about staying warm yourself. It is about keeping everyone warm enough. Cold carries stories with it. Not always accurate ones, but convincing enough to shape behavior. You hear them in passing comments. Half jokes. Warnings spoken with just enough seriousness to linger. Winter is blamed for aches, fevers, weakness, and sometimes for death itself. Cold becomes a character in explanations for what the body does when it fails. You feel it in your own bones now. A dull ache that settles into joints after hours of stillness. When you rise, stiffness greets you first. Not pain exactly, but resistance. Medieval people notice this too. Cold thickens the body, warmth loosens it. The connection feels obvious. People speak of cold as something that gets into you, into the chest, into the blood, into the marrow. Illness is often described as trapped cold that must be driven out. The language is vivid, physical, intuitive. You watch as someone warms their hands near the fire, then presses them gently against their chest or stomach. The gesture is purposeful. Heat is being applied where sickness is believed to begin. No thermometer confirms success, but experience suggests relief. Certain winter ailments are expected. Coughs, chapped skin, swollen joints, fatigue that clings. These are not emergencies. They are winter's companions. What causes alarm are sudden chills, unrelenting, shivering, weakness that worsens instead of easing. There is disagreement among later interpreters about how medieval people understood disease. Some suggest confusion ruled. Others argue that while explanations differed, observations were keen. Sitting here, watching responses unfold, you sense the latter. People may not name causes correctly, but they respond effectively. Warmth is the first remedy for almost everything. Extra blankets, closer proximity to fire, warm food and drink, rest when possible, movement when stiffness dominates. The same strategies appear again and again because they work often enough. You notice how dampness is feared more than cold itself. Wet clothes are changed immediately. Snow brushed off before it melts. Damp straw replaced. Moisture chills faster than dry air, and people know it instinctively. There is a small but persistent belief that drafts cause illness. Doors are blamed. Cracks in walls. Sudden gusts. Whether or not this is true in modern terms, the response is sensible. Drafts lower temperature quickly. Sealing them helps, regardless of theory. You hear someone caution against sleeping too close to cold walls. Another warns about going outside, sweaty. Advice overlaps. Sometimes contradicts. But the core remains. Avoid sudden cooling. Maintain steady warmth. Certain remedies circulate widely. Heated stones wrapped in cloth and placed near aching joints. Warm poultices. Hot water bottles made from clay or metal. These are not luxuries. They are improvised tools born from need. There is uncertainty about how often such practices prevented serious illness. Records are fragmentary. What is clear is that people invested effort in prevention. They noticed patterns. They adjusted behavior. Children are watched closely for signs of illness. Warmth is applied early, not because parents expect miracles, but because delay worsens outcomes. Early intervention matters when options are few. You sense how winter sharpens attention to the body. Every ache is evaluated, every cough noted. Cold heightens awareness. Some later observers criticize medieval medicine as ineffective. That judgment misses the quiet effectiveness of care rooted in warmth, rest, and nourishment, not cures. Perhaps, but buffers against decline. You settle deeper into blankets and feel tension ease slightly. Warmth does not erase discomfort, but it dulls it. That dulling is enough to allow sleep, and sleep restores what cold erodes. Illness and cold intertwine in stories and belief, but also in practice. The response is consistent. Warmth first, always. As night deepens, the fire glows faintly. Bodies lie still. Someone shifts, pulling a blanket tighter around aching shoulders. The movement is slow, careful, practiced. Winter does not always kill directly. It weakens. It creates openings. People fight back with heat, however imperfect. You breathe slowly, letting warmth settle where it can. The cold remains present, but its sharpness softens. In this world, health is fragile. Warmth is medicine, and every small effort to keep it close matters more than words ever could. You begin to understand why fuel is never far from anyone's thoughts. Even now, as the fire glows softly, there is a quiet awareness humming beneath conversation and movement. How much wood remains? How fast it burns? How long until morning? Fuel anxiety does not announce itself loudly. It lingers, like cold itself, patient and persistent. You glance at the stack near the hearth. It is smaller than comfort would suggest. Carefully chosen pieces lie on top, dry, split thin enough to catch easily. Thicker logs wait beneath. This order is deliberate. Starting warmth comes first. Sustaining warmth follows. Firewood is not gathered casually. It represents hours of labor performed long before winter arrived. Trees felled, branches cut, logs split, stacks arranged to dry properly. Mistakes made in summer are paid for in winter. You feel the weight of this preparation in the way people watch the fire. No one feeds it absent-mindedly. Each addition is considered. Too much fuel wastes heat. Too little risks embers dying. Balance is everything. There is a subtle hierarchy of fuels. Best wood saved for the coldest nights. Inferior fuel burned earlier. Peat, dung, brushwood each have their place. Smoke behavior changes with each. Smell shifts. Heat output varies. People learn these differences intimately. They can tell by sound when a fire is burning too hot, by smell when fuel is damp, by smoke when something is wrong. Fire communicates constantly if you know how to listen. You notice how fuel is rationed mentally, not formally. No one writes numbers down. They remember. Last winter, the winter before that, how long the pile lasted. Memory becomes inventory. Some households experience nights of real fear when fuel runs low. The fire burns smaller. People cluster closer. Blankets pile higher. Cold is negotiated carefully. These nights are remembered long after winter ends. There is uncertainty about how common outright fuel shortages were. Some years were generous, others devastating. Weather, harvests, access to woodland all mattered. What remains consistent is the dread of running out. You hear someone mention tomorrow's task quietly, gathering more fuel if possible, even in deep winter. People search. Fallen branches, wind-blown wood, anything that will burn. Effort continues until snow or ice truly forbids it. Fuel is protected carefully indoors. Moisture ruins it. Wood stacked near the hearth dries further. Too close risks sparks. Too far invites damp. Placement matters. Children are taught not to play near fuel stacks, not because of discipline, but necessity. Firewood is warmth waiting to happen. Damaging it steals from the future. At night, the last log added to the fire is chosen with care, one that burns slowly, steadily, extending embers until morning if luck allows. This moment carries weight. A poor choice means cold dawn. You lie back and listen as the fire settles around that final log. Crackle softens. Glow deepens. The house holds its breath. There is a quiet superstition around fire in some households. Not dramatic rituals, but respect. Ash is handled gently. Embers are spoken of softly. Fire is thanked, whether belief or habit. Reverence emerges naturally when something keeps you alive. You feel warmth pulse faintly through the room. Then stabilize. The fire has accepted its role for the night. Outside, wind presses harder now. Snow begins to fall again, tapping softly against roof and walls. Inside, fuel stands between survival and exposure. As sleep approaches, fuel anxiety fades slightly, replaced by trust in preparation. Enough has been done. Enough remains. Morning will come. The fire will be coaxed back to life. Another cycle will begin. For now, the glow holds. And in this quiet, you understand that warmth here is never taken for granted. Every flame is counted. Every ember matters. You start to realize how different winter feels depending on where you stand. Not just inside or outside, but across the land itself. Cold is not a single experience. It changes with hills and valleys, with forests and coastlines, with altitude and wind. Medieval peasants know this intimately. Geography shapes survival as much as habit. You imagine a village tucked into a valley. Cold air settles there at night, heavy and unmoving. Frost lingers long after sunrise. Fires are fed more often. Straw thickens earlier in the season. People learn to expect harsher mornings. Now you picture a settlement on a hillside. Wind scours warmth away relentlessly. But it also prevents cold from pooling. Nights feel sharper. But dawn brings relief sooner. Snow slides off roofs more easily. Choices differ. Solutions adjust. Along coasts and rivers, cold behaves differently again. Water moderates temperature slightly. But dampness increases. Wet cold seeps through clothing faster than dry frost. Wool becomes even more precious. Fires smoke differently in humid air. People respond with heavier layers and stricter attention to dryness. You feel how forests alter winter too. Trees break wind. They trap snow. Villages near woodland enjoy shelter. But they also contend with shade that delays warming sunlight. Fuel access improves, but dampness increases. Trade-offs are constant. What becomes clear across regions is that there is no universal medieval winter. People adapt locally, drawing on what their environment offers and what it denies. Stone houses dominate where stone is plentiful. Wood, where forests thrive. Turf, where neither exists. There is uncertainty about how much knowledge traveled between regions. Some techniques spread widely, others remained stubbornly local. What works in one climate fails in another. Trial and error governs adaptation. You imagine peasants moving between regions through marriage or labor. They bring habits with them. Some are abandoned quickly. Others prove useful. Warmth strategies evolve through migration as well as memory. Snow itself behaves differently across landscapes. In mountains, it insulates deeply, protecting roofs and earth beneath. In lowlands, it melts and refreezes, creating ice that steals heat aggressively. People learn when snow is friend and when it is threat. You notice how clothing varies subtly by region. Thicker felt in colder uplands, lighter wool near coasts. Cloaks shaped differently to shed rain or block wind. Fashion here is climate responding to need. Even food strategies change. Inland communities rely heavily on stored grain and preserved meat. Coastal settlements add fish and sea fat to winter diets. Fat content matters more where cold is damp and biting. You feel how time itself shifts with geography. In northern regions, daylight shrinks brutally. Work compresses further. Fires burn longer. In southern areas, winters remain harsh but shorter. Relief arrives sooner. Some later observers attempt to describe medieval winter as uniformly miserable. That oversimplifies reality. Hardship varies. Some winters are survivable. Others devastating. Place matters. You sense pride in local knowledge. This valley freezes early. That hill catches wind. These statements guide behavior. Outsiders learn quickly or suffer. As night settles again, you imagine countless households across Europe managing warmth differently at the same moment. Some huddled tightly in deep cold, others enduring damp chill. All negotiating with winter in their own way. There is a strange comfort in this diversity. Survival is not monolithic. It adapts. It bends. You pull your blanket closer and feel gratitude for the particular strategies that work here, in this place. On this night, elsewhere, other methods are holding back cold just as carefully. Winter spans the land, but it does not flatten it. Each region meets it on its own terms. You start to notice the smallest habits now, not the obvious ones, not fire or clothing or shelter, but the quiet, almost forgettable actions that slip between moments, the kind of things no one would bother to explain, because everyone already knows. These are the tricks that save warmth without announcing themselves. You watch someone pause before sitting, brushing snow from their boots carefully, even though it has almost melted already. Wet leather steals heat fast. Dry boots mean warmer feet for hours. That brief pause matters. You notice how people cup their hands before breathing into them, then rub palms together slowly, not frantically. Quick movements cool skin faster. Slow friction warms deeper tissue. This is learned, not taught. There is a habit of tucking clothing inward rather than outward. Shirts pull down over hips, cloaks overlapped across the chest. Loose fabric flaps in drafts and leaks warmth. Secured fabric holds it close. You see someone warm a spoon near the fire before eating. A small gesture. But a cold utensil drains heat instantly from lips and tongue. Warm food stays warm longer when the tools match its temperature. These details repeat everywhere once you start watching for them. At night, water containers are wrapped in cloth or placed near the hearth, not just to prevent freezing, but to ensure that morning tasks begin with warmth rather than shock. Washing hands in icy water numbs fingers and wastes precious heat early in the day. You notice how people avoid sitting directly on stone or wood. Even briefly, a folded cloak is placed first. A bundle of straw, even a hat. Direct contact steals warmth quickly. Barriers matter. Children are corrected gently when they forget these habits. Not scolded, just reminded. Cold provides the lesson soon enough. There is a curious practice you observe near bedtime. People warm their sleeping space before occupying it. Blankets held near the fire. Straw turned and fluffed. Bodies do not enter cold beds willingly. Pre-warmed spaces reduce heat loss during those first critical minutes. You feel how effective this is when you settle in. The difference is immediate. Your body relaxes rather than fights. Hands are often warmed before delicate tasks. Mending, knotting, writing. Cold fingers fumble, wasting time and energy. A brief pause at the hearth saves effort later. You notice how people exhale slowly through scarves or collars when outside. Breath warms the fabric, which then warms the next inhale. A simple cycle, repeated unconsciously. At night, someone places a hot stone wrapped in cloth near the foot of the bed. Not too close, just enough to take the edge off cold extremities. The stone cools gradually, releasing warmth while sleep deepens. There is uncertainty about how widespread this practice was, but wherever stone and fire coexisted, the idea appears naturally. Heat stored in objects becomes heat shared with bodies. You see someone place their hands beneath their thighs while seated, a posture that looks uncomfortable at first, but preserves warmth by trapping heat close to the core. Bodies fold inward in winter. Compactness conserves energy. Small fires are sometimes lit briefly in unused spaces to drive out damp, then extinguished. Dry air feels warmer than moist cold. This is preventative care, not extravagance. You begin to realize that winter survival here is made of margins. Seconds saved, degrees retained, drops of moisture avoided. None of these habits matter alone. Together, they add up to hours of comfort. People do not speak of these tricks as wisdom. They are simply the way things are done. Only an outsider would notice them. You catch yourself copying them automatically now. Adjusting fabric, choosing where to stand, warming objects before use. The body learns quickly when cold threatens. Some later observers dismiss such habits as superstition or fussiness. Sitting here, feeling their cumulative effect. That dismissal feels naive. Efficiency hides in repetition. As the night deepens, these small acts continue quietly. Someone shifts a log slightly. Another pulls a cloth tighter around a container. Someone else moves a stool a few inches closer to warmth. Nothing dramatic happens. And that is the point. Winter is survived not through heroics, but through attention. And in these barely noticed gestures, warmth is preserved long after firelight dims. Night sounds change when winter settles fully in. You notice it first in the quiet. Not silence exactly, but a thickening of it. Snow absorbs sound. Wind smooths sharp edges. The world outside the house feels padded, distant, as if wrapped in wool of its own. Inside, every sound carries differently. The crackle of embers seems louder. Breathing becomes more noticeable. Straw shifts under the slightest movement. These sounds are not distractions. They are information. You lie still and listen, learning the house by ear. The roof speaks first. A soft creak as frost tightens wood. A faint slide as snow shifts its weight. These noises are familiar, expected. They tell you the roof is holding. Then the walls answer. Wind presses, but does not whistle. That means the seals are good. A whistle would demand action. Someone would rise. Stuff a gap. Adjust a hanging cloth. Tonight, the house remains quiet enough. You hear animals nearby. Their presence a low, steady reassurance. A cow exhales slowly. A goat stamps once, then settles. These sounds mean warmth still flows through shared walls. Panic only rises when animals fall silent unexpectedly. There is a subtle difference between safe noises and dangerous ones. Safe sounds repeat. Dangerous sounds interrupt. A sudden crack. A sharp bang. The hiss of wind where none existed before. Winter trains the ear. You notice how lightly people sleep. Not tense, aware. Even deep sleep leaves room for listening. Bodies rest. But attention lingers just beneath the surface. A child whimpers briefly, then quiets as a blanket is adjusted. No words are exchanged. Sound communicates need quickly. You hear the fire settle, a log collapsing inward slightly. The sound is soft, not alarming. Embers glow brighter for a moment, then calm. This tells you the fire will last a while longer. Water makes its presence known too. A faint tick as ice forms near the rim of a container. That sound prompts action tomorrow. More insulation will be added. The house learns. Outside. Wind rises. Then fades. Snow taps gently against the roof. These are good sounds. Snow insulates. Wind that passes quickly means weather is shifting, not worsening. You imagine how frightening night must feel without this familiarity. To an outsider, every creak would sound like threat. To those who live here, these sounds form a language. There is disagreement about how much sleep was truly restful in such conditions. Some interpretations suggest constant vigilance robbed people of deep rest. Others point to adaptation. Light sleep does not mean poor sleep when the body expects it. You feel yourself drifting in and out. Awareness floating with you. A sound wakes you just enough to register it, then releases you again. This pattern repeats. Rest comes in waves. You realize that sound itself becomes a source of warmth. Familiar noises reassure. Reassurance calms the body. Calm conserves heat. Silence, when absolute, can be unsettling. A total absence of sound suggests extreme cold or deep snow. In those moments, people listen harder, ready to act. The house breathes around you. Wood contracts and relaxes. Fabric shifts. Bodies turn slightly. All of it blends into a soft rhythm. You listen until listening itself becomes tiring. Then you let the sounds carry you downward, into deeper rest. Winter night wraps the house tightly. Inside, warmth holds not just through fire and fabric, but through attention sharpened by sound. And as sleep finally settles more firmly, the house continues to speak softly, keeping watch until morning. You begin to notice that warmth is not only something you feel on your skin, it settles in your mind as well. As winter stretches on, the cold becomes familiar, not comfortable, exactly, but known. And something curious happens when discomfort becomes predictable. Fear loosens its grip. Anxiety fades into routine. The mind adapts, just as the body does. You feel it now as you sit near the hearth, wrapped in wool, listening to familiar sounds. The cold outside has not vanished, but it no longer feels urgent. Your thoughts slow. Your breathing deepens. Warmth arrives quietly through familiarity. People here rely heavily on routine during winter. The same actions, performed in the same order, at the same times, not because they lack imagination, but because predictability calms the mind. Calm preserves energy. Energy preserves heat. You notice how evenings unfold almost identically night after night. Fire tended, food eaten, tools set aside, stories told, sleep prepared. This repetition becomes reassuring. It signals safety. When the mind knows what comes next, it relaxes. Muscles soften. The body stops wasting energy on vigilance. That saved energy becomes warmth. You realize how important this is. Panic chills faster than cold air ever could. A racing mind tightens muscles, sharpens breathing, drains reserves. Calm does the opposite. There is a subtle practice woven into winter evenings. People talk about ordinary things, small events, familiar jokes, nothing urgent, nothing alarming. Conversation becomes a blanket laid gently over worry. You hear laughter, soft and brief, not loud enough to disturb the fire, but enough to lift spirits. Laughter warms the chest. It loosens tension. People feel warmer afterward, even if the temperature has not changed. Storytelling plays a role here too. Tales repeated year after year. stories whose endings are known. There is comfort in knowing how things turn out. Surprise is for summer. Winter prefers certainty. Children ask for the same stories again and again. Adults comply willingly. Repetition is not boredom. It is reassurance. You notice how people frame hardship when they speak of it. This winter is not as bad as that one. At least we have more fuel than last year. Comparison tempers fear. Perspective narrows discomfort. There is uncertainty about how consciously people use these psychological strategies. No one names them. They simply work. Behaviors that soothe survive. Those that provoke anxiety fade. You feel how shared presence itself warms the mind. Sitting alone in a cold room feels colder than sitting with others. Even without physical contact, company softens the experience of cold. Loneliness chills. Belonging warms. This becomes especially clear at night. Darkness amplifies thought. Cold sharpens it. People counter this by sleeping near one another, by listening to familiar breathing, by trusting that someone else is awake if needed. You lie back and feel that trust settle over you. You are not alone with the cold. Others share the watch. Even in sleep, there is a quiet confidence that develops over time. You have survived winter nights before. You will survive this one too. Memory builds resilience. Some observers later describe medieval life as psychologically harsh. That overlooks the ways people supported each other emotionally. Hardship existed. Yes, but so did coping. Faith. Routine. Humor. Familiarity. Shared silence. These form a mental hearth, glowing even when fire dims. You notice how children mirror adult calm. When adults move steadily, speak softly, act with confidence, children relax. Fear spreads quickly. So does composure. This awareness shapes behavior. Panic is avoided not out of bravery, but wisdom. A frightened household loses heat faster. You feel your own thoughts slowing now, drifting gently. The edges of worry blur. The cold becomes background sensation rather than threat. Sleep approaches more easily when the mind is warm. As the night deepens, the fire fades further. The room cools slightly, but the mental warmth remains. It cushions the change. You breathe slowly, counting nothing, thinking of nothing urgent. The world narrows to breath, to wool, to sound. In this moment, you understand something essential. Staying warm in the Middle Ages was as much about mindset as material. Acceptance did not mean resignation. It meant working within reality, calmly, steadily, together. And in that calm, warmth lingers longer than firelight alone ever could. By now, the cold no longer feels like an interruption. It feels like a condition of life, something woven into every decision, every habit, every expectation. You realize that no one here waits for winter to end before living again. Life does not pause. It simply narrows, tightens, concentrates. People do not speak of winter as extraordinary. They speak of it as inevitable. You hear this in the way plans are made. Not ambitious, sprawling plans, but careful ones. Enough fuel to last, enough food to endure, enough strength to see the thaw. The goal is not comfort. It is continuity. You notice how rarely people complain outright, not because they are stoic heroes, but because complaint offers no warmth. Energy is spent where it matters. Acceptance frees effort for survival. Children grow up surrounded by this mindset. They do not learn that winter is unfair. They learn that winter is real, and that reality can be managed, if not controlled. You feel how this perspective reshapes endurance. Cold nights are not counted individually. They blur together. Weeks pass, not as a series of hardships, but as a single season with its own rules. Some later writers portray medieval peasants as constantly miserable. Sitting here, that feels inaccurate. Discomfort exists. Yes, but misery requires expectation of ease. When expectations align with reality, suffering softens. You sense a quiet pride in endurance. Not boastful, not spoken, but present. Surviving winter is an achievement. Even if it happens every year, each spring feels earned. You notice how people mark small victories. A fire that lasts through the night. A child who sleeps without shivering. A roof that holds under heavy snow. These moments matter. Food tastes better in winter. Not because it is richer, but because it sustains. Warmth feels deeper because it is fragile. Pleasure sharpens when scarcity defines it. You realize that winter shapes identity. People know themselves as survivors of cold. This knowledge carries forward into every aspect of life. Work ethic, community bonds, patience. There is uncertainty about how consciously people framed their identity this way. They did not sit and reflect on it often, but actions speak. Repeated endurance leaves marks. You feel those marks now in the way the house feels familiar rather than hostile, in the way the fire's glow feels sufficient rather than inadequate, in the way cold no longer shocks. This acceptance does not erase hardship, it makes it manageable. As the night moves toward its quietest hours, you sense a deep stillness settle over everything, the kind that comes just before dawn. The cold reaches its peak. The fire glows faintly. Breath fogs softly. This is the hardest part of the night, and yet, it passes. You notice how people stir slightly, sensing the coming change. Morning is not far. Embers will be coaxed back to flame. Light will return, pale and weak, but enough. Hope here is not dramatic. It is practical. Morning always comes. Even in winter, you lie still, wrapped in wool and routine and shared resilience. The cold presses gently now, no longer sharp. In this world, endurance is not heroic, it is ordinary. And that ordinariness is what carries people through. You sense the cold beginning to loosen its grip. Not dramatically, not all at once, just a subtle shift. Almost imperceptible at first. The darkest hours have passed. The night has done its worst. And you are still here. This is the quiet triumph of winter survival. You lie still and listen. The house sounds different now. Not warmer yet, but lighter. The silence has thinned. Somewhere, a bird stirs faintly, confused by the long night. Inside, someone moves near the hearth, careful not to wake others. Embers are coaxed gently. Breath offered. Tinder placed just so. A faint glow strengthens. Not enough to warm the room, but enough to promise it will. You feel stiffness in your body as you shift. Cold still clings to joints and fingers, but there is no panic in it. This is expected. Morning always begins like this in winter. Warmth is rebuilt slowly, step by step. People wake in stages. No sudden rising. No shock to the body. Blankets are loosened gradually. Hands warmed before work begins. Movement returns carefully, like light after darkness. You realize now that survival here is cumulative. No single night decides your fate. It is the repetition of many nights like this one, managed well enough, that carries people through the season. Winter does not demand perfection. It demands consistency. You watch as the house reverses its nighttime posture. Shutters are cracked slightly to test the air. Dampness is checked. Straw is turned. Water containers inspected. Each task restores warmth incrementally. Outside, dawn creeps in pale and hesitant. The cold remains, but it no longer feels infinite. The sun may be weak, but it exists. That is enough. You feel a quiet satisfaction settle in your chest. Another night endured, another morning earned. Some later narratives frame medieval life as a constant struggle against suffering. Sitting here, that framing feels incomplete. There is struggle. Yes, but there is also mastery. A deep, practiced understanding of how to live within limits. People do not curse the cold as much as they plan around it. They do not expect comfort. They build resilience instead. You think back over the night. The fire, the wool, the animals, the shared warmth, the habits, the memory, the calm. None of these alone would be enough. Together, they form a system that works just well enough. That is the secret. Staying warm in the Middle Ages was never about defeating winter. It was about cooperating with it, giving ground where necessary, holding it back where possible, learning its rhythms and moving with them. You rise slowly now, feeling circulation return. The day will be cold too. Work will be stiff. Breath will fog. But the worst has passed for this cycle. Spring will come. It always does. But even if it feels far away, you know now that distance is survivable. You step closer to the hearth and feel warmth bloom once more. Life continues. And as you stand there, wrapped in wool and habit and quiet endurance, you understand something deeply human. People did not survive the medieval cold because they were stronger than winter. They survived because they learned how to live with it. Now, stay where you are for a moment. Let the image soften. The fire no longer demands attention. The house has done its work. Outside, the cold lingers, but it feels less sharp now, more distant, as if it has stepped back slightly to give you space. Breathe slowly, in through your nose, out through your mouth. Imagine the warmth settling evenly through your body. Not rushing, not forcing itself, just spreading gently, the way morning light spreads across frost without erasing it all at once. You do not need to solve anything now. You do not need to plan or prepare. The night has passed. The hardest hours are behind you. Think of the quiet resilience you have just walked through, the small choices, the shared warmth, the calm acceptance. Let that steadiness rest with you. If your mind drifts, let it drift. If thoughts appear, let them pass like smoke rising toward the rafters, thinning as they go. You are safe. You are warm enough. That is enough. The fire crackles softly one last time in your imagination, then settles into a steady glow. Sleep can come now. Sweet dreams.